I wanted to talk to you today about why the news is bullshit. Because it is. When I was 20, I got into radio for the first time. And kind of an interesting side story how I got into radio. There was a tobacco festival in my hometown. I lived in a very small town called Carrollton, Kentucky, and they had a tobacco festival each year with a parade, and a local radio station from Madison, Indiana was pushing a float made out of plywood painted to look like a boombox on wheels, and they were pushing it down the street in a parade, and I yelled out something smartass to them, like a smart aleck, because I was the funny guy who had to say stupid shit all the time. I said, "Hey, do you guys need any new DJs?" And somebody poked their head up from behind the boombox float and said, "Yeah." And I got hired to be a journalist. That's how I got into broadcasting, by yelling something out smartass to some guys pushing some plywood down the street. So right off the bat, I don't have a whole real high opinion of broadcasting journalism, because that's how I got hired to be a journalist. I was hired by this little radio station to go to town hall meetings and report on them. I was going to be a reporter. Well, I missed the first 3 town hall meetings I was supposed to go to, and I figured for sure they were going to fire me. And the reason I didn't go is because I didn't know how to be a reporter. I was 20. I didn't know anything about fucking reporting. This is in the 80s. Everything I knew about reporting came from Tabitha Soren on MTV News and Kurt Loder. By the way, whatever happened to Tabitha Soren, I would jump on that today. Anyway, so then they hired me to be a DJ, even though I'd completely flaked on the first 3 reporting things I was supposed to go do. And at that little dinky radio station, WORX Madison, FM and AM, we did a 10-minute newscast every night. So my very first night on the air, my very first night of broadcasting, I had to do a 10-minute newscast by myself. And the way I did that newscast is I got all my news stories off of the AP Wire, the Associated Press. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. And that, ooh, there's like, what is that? Got a big old crows flying over my head right now. Anyway, the Associated Press is where you get most of the news stories that you've ever heard in your life from. That's where the news came from. And everybody in this country has a really wrong opinion about what the Associated Press is. They think that it's some kind of giant news organization that sends out reporters and has an editor that's hard-nosed and is like, "All right, you guys, get out there and dig for that story." And then he coughs like that because he's got bronchitis. I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that. So the Associated Press, that's where most of the people in this country get their news from, and they don't even realize it. And what the Associated Press is, it's a news agency. I always think it's funny when businesses use the term agency. We're an agency. Oh, really? What makes you an agency? Do you have employees? No, we don't have employees. We have agents. That's why we're an agency. So this news agency, what it does is it doesn't send out reporters to report on things. It collects stories, news reports, from the people that subscribe to it. And it is a subscription service. You have to pay a lot of money to be able to read Associated Press stories on your broadcast. It costs a fortune. And if you try to do it without paying them, believe me, they'll come after you. So much for the free press and thinking that maybe they just want to spread the truth around, because it's a business. It's not about spreading the truth. So this company, like I said, they don't have any reporters of their own. They accumulate stories from the people that subscribe to them. Now, here I am, 20 years old. I'm on my first day of training at this radio station that I got hired at, and they're showing me the AP Wire. It used to just come across, before the internet, it would just come across this teletype machine, and you had to kill whole forests of trees to have boxes of paper underneath this teletype machine, because it was constantly going, And then what you would do is you would go rifling through these just huge reams of paper, of these printouts, and try to find stories that you thought were of interest to your listeners, and then you would read them. And then I had to do a 10-minute newscast every night. And I got all this news from the AP because the station that I worked for didn't have the resources to hire reporters to go out and cover all these stories and find all this stuff. So they just subscribed to the AP. The AP sends them these stories, and then they would read them on the air. And they not only go to radio stations, they go to every television station, news organization, and they go to every newspaper. Newspapers don't have the resources to send reporters out everywhere. In my hometown, we had a newspaper that came out once a week, and it was always like a week late on all the news. But even then, it was a bunch of Associated Press stories with the occasional picture of the local football team lined up. And then the next day, they would have a picture, the next week, there'd be a picture of the cheerleaders. You know, that's how they would keep interest among their readers. So the Associated Press, as I said, they get all of their news stories from their subscribers. So here I am, 20, and I'm learning, and I go, well, wait a minute, you mean I could write a story and submit it to the Associated Press? And my boss goes, yeah. And I go, well, how would they know that it's true? Will they double check it? And he goes, no, they'll check it for spelling errors. That's about it. They're gonna leave it to you to double check. So it was on me, my 20-year-old kid shoulders, to double check my story before I submit it to the Associated Press. So I learned on my very first day of broadcasting that I, if I wanted to, could completely just fake a story, just write a news story, and then fax it to the AP. Fax, that tells you how long ago this was. I could fax that shit to the AP, and then some other young knucklehead who was probably making minimum wage like me in Indianapolis, who was the regional AP editor, would check it for spelling errors, and then if he felt that it was an interesting enough story, he would send it out regionally and then nationally and then worldwide if they thought it was interesting enough. And nowhere along the line would anybody ever double check to see if any of this story was true. Think about that. I, or anybody, has the power to just send a story into the Associated Press if I work for a subscriber to them, and they print that shit, and it goes around the world, and newscasters on TV, newspapers are printing it as fucking fact, and everybody believes it. And they go around and they tell the story, and it gets changed and get made worse every time everybody tells it to a friend. This is why I tell people, you can't trust the news. You can't trust newspapers, television, radio, because they don't fucking know anything. They're just reading something that somebody sent to them. They don't know who sent it to them. Nobody knows. Nobody's checking shit. It's ridiculous. And when you're armed with that type of information, when you know the truth about the truth, it helps you to decipher what's going on in our world a lot better. Good luck. I really like this strap too.